Hello and welcome to What Now with Anna and Eric. I am Anna.
I'm Eric.
And we are reading through the Bible chronologically in the year
of our Lord.
In the year of our Lord, yes. And we're almost through the Old Testament, which is very exciting.
We're getting so close.
We're on the cusp of greatness.
I really wish you wouldn't have told me the date that we are actually going to get in the New Testament, because now that's really all I can think about.
It's like how close it is. Yeah, same.
And actually, when we podcast next week, will we be in?
No.
No.
We miss it. We miss it, I think, by... wait, hang on. I'm looking.
Yeah, because I think we go through the 22nd.
Yeah, we go through the 22nd. Literally, it's we literally podcast the last day of the Old Testament. Wow, that fell really strategically. It seems like that was planned since January. It was not.
Oh,
literally.
Man.
So that's the Tuesday, which is usually what we go through. So we're doing a clean close of the Old Testament.
Yep, and then that next week we'll have a fresh start.
It's very exciting. I do want to say, so the next step, one of the next steps from last week was catch up on all of your reading. Did it.
Did you really?
Yeah.
I realized in my catch-up time, I missed some of the it was a mess. My catch-up did not go well because now I need other things to catch up on. So listen, by the time I get to the New Testament, I
got a week. 1 week.
Yes. I'm gonna get it. But we'll get there.
So I realized we didn't do this last week, but Eric, what is your 3-word summary of this week's reading?
Oh, so I was because my 3-word summary of the reading usually is my feelings towards what is going on. That's usually my 3-word summary. And so mine is, we're so close, because we are so close to finishing this out. So that's where I went with it, just because as I'm going through this, I'm reading with an excitement of, all right, we're closing this book out. Let's get these done so we can get to some good news. But you always have the actual 3-word summary of a whole.
I did my feeling one time, I think.
Yes.
Or twice.
So what's your 3-word summary?
All right, just so I feel like women are great. That's what I put.
There you go.
Mostly because I thought it was funny. But we were in Esther. We hit all of Esther. We went beginning to end of Esther all throughout this week. And so I put down a lot of my notes were from Esther, mostly because I thought they were hilarious.
I'm pretty sure we've touched on getting to Esther, and so this is, I think, a big moment for you and a big week for you.
I was excited to get to Esther. I'm like, if we can't get to Jesus, Esther would be a nice secondary.
There's things that I realize when reading this, Ezra did not. How many times do you have biblical discussions about Ezra? I mean, I'm wondering, when books of the Bible or things to talk about, I'm trying to think of how many times I've gotten into discussions about Ezra and that, but Ezra seems to be a pretty big deal, or at least had some pretty good impact here. And I was realizing that, when I'm reading, I'm like, when do we really even ever talk about that,
I feel like sometimes Ezra and Nehemiah are spoken about together because they both kind of get into the temple, the building of the temple, how God felt about it.
Because that's what, and I know the Nehemiah stuff, Nehemiah, you hear a lot of talks on it, you hear a lot of people get mad.
Yeah.
But it's I couldn't even tell you, even hearing a pastor or a message say, and we're going to dive into the book of Ezra. Like,
Ezra. So good.
Like I said, the only time is when I've seen the band better than Ezra, and really, I really want to dive into what that name of that band means, because I don't know.
Are they really better? I don't know.
I don't think Ezra did a lot of great things, so I don't know.
As you say that, I'm thinking too, like, I don't know if I've ever heard anybody talk about, like, hey guy.
Hey guy, yeah. I don't think anybody talked about Habakkuk until Craig Groeschel wrote a book about, so I think that really brought light to that. So
they should have been talking about it. Habakkuk is a great name. Just even the name is good.
And they're great books because they're like seriously like 3 chapters. Like some of those books are like, I think Habakkuk is really only 3 chapters, so it makes you feel very accomplished.
That's very true. You can say, I read a book of the Bible. So if you're looking to impress your friends, some good books to read, Habakkuk. Jude is literally 1 chapter.
Oh yeah, because everybody says a good book to read in the Bible is
the book of Jude.
Another one.
It's just 1 chapter. That's it. It's right before Revelations too, so I think it's like a, all right, you can feel accomplished before you get into Revelations. You're like, I lost it. I don't know what's happening.
But yeah, that's.
Speaking of Revelations, Zechariah did write. He got into apocalyptic prophecy to some extent. Because I was looking into that. I did write some of those down. I was looking them up. So like Zechariah 14 was pretty apocalyptic. But something I did think was cool is speaking of, the prophets, Haggai. I don't even know if that's how you pronounce it.
I think it's Haggai.
I'm assuming. I'm making an assumption.
Haggai.
So in Ezra, good book, Ezra 6:14, it says, so the Jewish elders continued their work, and they were greatly encouraged by the preaching of the prophets Haggai and Zechariah, son of Iddo. And I was like, finally, the prophets are getting a break. Like, up to this point, they've just been, like, slapped across the face, imprisoned, killed. Nobody likes them.
Yeah.
So I was like, this is at the very end of the Old Testament, finally, people were like, they're pretty nice. I
mean, you know what? But once again, it's not really by the masses. It's by somebody. It's written by
Ezra.
By Ezra, who is. It says over and over again, like how dedicated he is to his faith and to God. So he's given him credit, but it's like kind of that preaching to the choir thing. Like, Ezra gets it, but those masses of people, they still aren't quite sure.
The truth. So before we get into Esther, do you have anything else to say about Zechariah, Ezra?
No, and I missed, I think we had 3 chapters of Daniel in there, and I totally
did. That's true.
Until I logged in to start this podcast, I'm like, that's where my catch up screwed me up, because I did not get into
Well, that was mainly, this week's reading was really 50% prophecy, 50% Esther. That's pretty much what it came down to. Because even the passages that we looked at by Daniel were mainly just prophecy about things that were to come in the world that was going to happen, mainly like forces taking over other forces, nations fighting this nation, that sort of thing. So we hit a lot of that, mainly just through.
And it was so funny. I had some Kings and Chronicles in there in my catch up, and I was like, man, if I didn't have to catch up, I think I would. I think
you would be out of it because it's done. I think it's done.
Yeah, I didn't
say that, but I really shouldn't, because
it'll pop back up to.
They like the return.
So let's get into your girl. Let's talk about your girl.
Let's talk. First Chronicles on September 20th. Still there.
You would. You know
I just looked at it because I was thinking about it. Chronicles is to the very end of the Old Testament.
Oh.
I hang
All right. So this is your time to shine. This is
Okay, so Esther. Yes, I am actually excited to talk about this. Interesting fact about Esther. The only book in the Bible where God is not directly mentioned. At one point, some of the characters in the book do talk about, well, let it be unto you if you don't do this according to the Lord, yada, yada. But it never talks about what God is. I mean, God doesn't say anything, quote unquote, and he doesn't do anything, quote unquote. I mean, we know that he is doing something because he is God. And we can tell that from the flow of what is happening in the current events. But he's never directly mentioned. Only book of the Bible where this happens. So this is very much historical genre. And what's cool about this is that this is very much a women hype book, I guess. But it starts out a very non-women hype book. So, like, the very beginning, King Xerxes is throwing this party. So I'm just going to read some of the verses as we're going through these because I thought it was really funny. So Esther chapter 1, verse 4, he does the celebration. It's lasted 180 days. He gives everybody a bunch of wine. So everybody's really drunk.
That's
the whole time for this whole party. And then on day 7, so people have been drinking for 7 days, he calls for his Queen Vashti to come and basically to show her off in front of a bunch of drunk people, which she's like, no thanks, because he wouldn't want to do that. And then this is so funny because there are so many instances where big decisions are made by King Xerxes while he's drinking. It's just like, why are you doing this? So he calls a bunch of his advisors at this drinking party, and he's like, what are we supposed to do? Like, my queen didn't come, So they're like, oh, wait, I have the best solution. We'll get rid of her. And then this is their reasoning. So Esther chapter 1, 17 to 18. Women everywhere will begin to despise their husbands when they learn that Queen Vashti has refused to appear before the king. Before this day is out, the wives of all the king's nobles throughout Persia and Media. Oh, no, I just lost it. Where did it go? Hang on. Will hear what the queen did, and they will start treating their husbands the same way. There will be no end to their contempt and anger. And then 22. So he sent letters to all parts of the empire, to each province, proclaiming that every man should be ruler of his own home and should say whatever he pleases. I was like, this is the chapter that intros the Women Are Great book. It's like these guys like, listen, we need to suppress women before this gets out of hand.
And could you, he sent that letter. If he didn't send that letter, could you imagine the movement that would have happened right there? I mean, all the women would have rose up right there in that time.
Horrible. Would have been horrible. Women's suffrage. Something would happen. Something interesting. Oh no, you froze.
You froze. You're back.
You froze.
You froze.
You froze.
I would never.
Okay.
I would never. But yeah, I don't know. I look at that. Could you imagine if he had a Twitter account or had a cell phone? He could have got that out real quick. He had to send letters to all of these people.
Which
don't let your women do this.
So funny. So funny. And okay, so then we go forward, right? So yeah. Esther, he sends out this proclamation that women from everywhere are basically going to try out to be queen. Unfortunate set of circumstances. The tryouts are
Got talent, only not so much.
Yeah, it's not great. And she's chosen. She becomes queen. Well, there's a secondary character, Haman, who hates really Esther's uncle, but is like her adopted dad. Basically, Haman's a horrible person, and Mordecai doesn't want to bow down to him because he's like, I'm not going to just bow down to random people. I love Jesus, etc. He doesn't know he loves Jesus, but Jesus is coming. So then, again, so I highlighted this verse again. So Haman goes and he's like, I want to get rid of all of these horrible people, and King Xerxes, you don't want them. They have their own laws. They're not going to listen to you. So Xerxes is like, sure. yeah, let's definitely kill off all the Jews. And then the last verse of Esther chapter 3, at the king's command, the decree went out by swift messengers, and it was also proclaimed in the fortress of Susa. Then the king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city of Susa fell into confusion. Because they're like, what is this decree that is coming out of here? And then Xerxes and Haman are like, all right, we did good work. Let's drink.
We're all good. That's all good. It's all good.
My respect for this king was very low.
He doesn't go on the good king. He doesn't go on the real respectful, powerful kings. He kind of goes in the way of the reject pile, as it were.
So there are a lot of hilarious things that happened in this. I felt like, I think the big spiritual points mostly happen in chapter 4. So basically Mordecai finds out this decree went out to kill all Jews, and he goes to Esther. And he says, you need to go and talk to him. Well, she's like, she says, I can't do that because if you go in front of the king, I haven't been in front of him for 30 days, it's a whole month. Yeah. You will die, basically. And and you have to remember too, coming off the context of this decree just went out not too long ago that men can say whatever they want. Women just need to listen. Like, her predecessor was exiled swiftly just for not showing up to a party, right? Yeah. And so that is what she is coming off of. And then her adopted dad, basically Mordecai, says, chapter 4, verse 14, if you keep quiet at a time like this, deliverance and relief for the Jews will rise from some other place, but you and your relatives will die. Who knows if perhaps you were made queen for just such a time as this. So it's a pretty big moment.
Yeah, and that was because you talk about, like, it is that book where God's not mentioned, or there's not that title of it, but then you look at 16 and that reply of, go gather together all the Jews who are in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day, and I and my attendants will fast as you do. When this is done, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law. If I perish, I perish. And it's like,
on that same verse.
So who are when they're fasting, what are they doing? They're praying. They're asking for God's help. They're asking for God to come into that. So it's like, God's in it. God's in it. And that's, where does that strength and confidence from I can't go talk to the king, to, okay, if we fast for this amount of time, and in that they're going to be praying for me, there's strength in that, and if I perish, I perish. So there's that shift, and it seems like the shift is, okay, once God is brought into the equation, then there's strength and confidence and the ability to do it. Mm-hmm. That's highlighting that part in 4 is, I think, that shift that is really cool to see.
Although she's still clearly nervous. Like, even, I mean, if you if you look at it, she goes into king's court, he raises a scepter, and she's okay, and he's like, all right, what can I do for you? And she's like, well, come have a party with me. So
it all goes back to parties.
Yeah, that all comes back to the drinking. So she clearly understands that when he is drinking, he is much more susceptible to making random decrees. So she invites him to a party. And then they're at the party, and then the king goes and he says, okay, now what do you want? And I actually think it's fun to read this part out loud. So Esther 5, 7 through 8, because I feel like she's like almost there, and then she's like, no. So Esther replied, this is my request and deepest wish. If I have found favor with the king, and if it pleases the king to grant my request and do what I ask, please come with Haman tomorrow to another banquet. Like, I feel like she's like almost there, and she's like, I can't do it.
Now, you know what? Another party.
Yeah.
Another party.
Which, I mean, is if you're thinking about it, I mean, yeah, she's the queen, but she's also a Jew who had just had this decree that they're all going to be slaughtered. So it's not like there's no risk, even though she got the king's attention. Like there's continually an additional step of risk that comes here. But
Yeah.
I just thought that part was so funny because it starts out like really intense, like my deepest wish, come to another party.
You know what? I'm gonna put on another party and then I'll answer your question. Then I gotcha.
Yeah.
Not yet, but I'll get there.
She's great. Esther is great. This just cracks me up.
Oh.
But this is just this was a good, and you know what's interesting about the book of Esther too, if you have not really read the Bible because you think it's boring and maybe because you read Numbers and then went directly to Deuteronomy, whatever that is, Esther is a great book to read if you're like, man, I just want to engage in scripture. It has everything. I mean, they've made several movies about this book really why wouldn't they? There's like double crossings going on. There's like attempted assassinations. There's all of these crazy things where like, you know, the down and out orphan gets taken into the kingdom. So there's just like, this is like basically the plot of every good movie.
I had to, it was the end of, once again, things that probably shouldn't make me chuckle, but make me chuckle is the kind of the chapter heads, the titles of different chapters. And chapter 7 is Haman impaled. That's chapter 7. And you get to the end of it, and it's just funny because it was like the king was so upset, and then one of his eunuchs says, hey, there's a really tall pole over at that person's house. And the king's reaction is, impale him on it.
Yeah.
Hey, there's a pole over there. Yes, let's impale. That's great. I just think it's just like, okay, that's what we're gonna do. That's where we're at. I don't know. It's just those little things. It's like that's just the world they're living in at that point.
Yeah, that's very true. Oh, there are so many different cultural points in the Bible where you just have to remember this is the way the world was at the time.
Yeah.
And God is generous enough and merciful enough to work with us where we're at.
Yeah. I've just never gotten to the point because I can look out my window right now and I can see 3 flagpoles, and never once was Amy like, oh, the kids are acting up. Impale that. Like, there's a pole right over there. Look at that.
I'm glad that you didn't come to that parental decision.
We've come so far in culture that impaling on a random pole is not an option. So, you know what? Society has come a long way.
So before we get into next steps, I did have one verse from Zechariah that I forgot about. Zechariah, chapter 9, verse 9. Rejoice, O people of Zion. Shout in triumph, O people of Jerusalem. Look, your king is coming to you. He is righteous and victorious, yet he is humble, riding on a donkey's colt. That's Jesus.
What? Come on.
So good. He's coming. We're only 7 days away.
Why would somebody as important as Jesus ride in on a donkey? Man, that just doesn't that seems so counterculture.
But I do like how this is one of those verses where if you didn't know that Jesus rides in on a donkey, you probably wouldn't make the connection. You'd be like, what is this even referring to? But
once again, if you're reading chronologically, when that point comes in the New Testament, that's one of those, what? Oh, man.
We totally talked about that in Zechariah.
Yeah. All right. So I was thinking about next steps, and I'm pretty sure this has been your next step in the past. So what's your next step this week? And then I'm going to share. You want me to go first? Yeah, because mine might be a repeat from one of yours, but it really struck me going into this week. So if mine's a repeat, at least we'll get something fresh from you.
Okay, mine is really to ask people what Mordecai asked Esther. So 4:14. So if you keep quiet at a time like this, and the time that we are in now, relief will arise from some other place. But who knows what that will mean for you? And who knows if perhaps you were made for such a time as this? So I think that would be my question to people, especially in the time that we are in now. And maybe you're being quiet about something. Maybe you're not engaging with people. Maybe you're just waiting for it to be over. But
waiting it out.
Yeah, waiting it out. But maybe you were made for such a time as this. So ask yourself that question.
And I think to go along with that, if you have been in this with us, if you're somewhat in this reading and we are getting into the New Testament, and this is where I think I stole this from you. So if I did, then all credit goes to Anna. But this week, as we read, as we close out the Old Testament, I truly think it is that preparing yourself for getting into the New Testament. Because I think, wasn't yours prepare your heart?
Technically, I stole it from you. And then I said it. Because you talked about it. Then I was like, I'm going to take that and make it my next step. And now here we are a week later and you're stealing it back. So
there you go. So I'm just taking back what is rightfully mine.
Yeah.
I'm just taking back what is rightfully mine. And
hey, you said I got all credit. You already said that.
So really, I think you just were a little quick to pull the trigger on that next step, because now that we have this kind of end point, is the finish line is there and something new is about to happen. I think wrapping up the Old Testament, catching up, and making sure that you are ready for being open to now this new covenant that we are living in today, to really get that and take that all in. I think that's understanding that I think we're going into, if it hasn't been already, if it's been a lot of informational reading just to gain knowledge from the Bible, I think this is the time where this is really going to become transformational, where we're reading it from a point of how can not only we really transform our life and how can God work in that, but how can God work in the world around us through Jesus. So we can't underestimate and we can't undersell the importance of what we're going into with this reading. So that's huge for me, and that's kind of where I'm at. So I think it's good.
I also think it's good. We have one more week.
One more week.
One more week of Old Testament. One more week with Chronicles in it.
Just need that.
Ever since we hit Chronicles, it's just not stopping.
There's some things that are just going to hang on. I can't wait to see what our New Testament hanger-on books are going to be. Like we've
Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John.
They're just going to stay there.
They're all going to happen at once. That's more what I'm thinking. So it's going to feel like they hang on.
Yeah, I'm trying to think, because I've never looked at the Bible chronologically, so like in my head, I'm trying to look at the New Testament, and I'm like, okay, chronologically, where does this fall? It'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
Yeah, that's very true.
So,
thank you for listening to One Hour with Ann and Eric. We are so excited to be out of the New Old Testament after 1 week, but hang on.
So close.
We're so close.
Don't give up now.
And next week, my next step will be prepare your hearts for the New Testament.
Listen.
Taking them back from Eric. So
every week we will alternate. We are always going to be preparing our hearts. Always. It's just who's going to tell you to prepare your heart.
Truth. So thank you for listening. We will see you next week.
See ya.